sounded almost like the police were talking about throwing some sort of bricks, weapons, water bottles, anything like that happening.
I've seen water bottles. I've seen people throw water bottles. That's about what I've seen. Yeah, that's all I can attest to directly, is I've seen people throw water bottles. And I have seen, again, I've seen some sort of person-to-person skirmishes between police and protesters, where police are pushing protesters and protesters in some instances are pushing back. That's what I've seen.
And David, lastly, this is all in response to ongoing immigration enforcement across Los Angeles County at a level we've not seen maybe ever. And there's a lot of fear in the community. And NBC News has been reporting from the border czar himself, Tom Homan, that this could be going on for weeks, if not months.
Yeah, look, it's a little bit hard to know. Homan himself, when he gives interviews, he tends to say that they, exercise immigration enforcement authority every single day. So I think he was being a little bit elusive when he answered my colleague Jake Soberoff's question that way. It's unclear how long they're going to be able to keep up immigration enforcement activity at this scale, particularly given this response happening that you see behind me, which does in fact, whether federal authorities want to admit it or not, does in fact get it physically in the way of them being able to go to work sites, stage their operations. It is hard for them to do that work at that scale when this kind of thing is happening behind them. This kind of thing takes away a lot of resources, and it just makes it hard for them to move. Now, that is a big question, though, that I don't have the answer to. Will they, in the days to come, continue trying to affect these large-scale immigration enforcement actions in the LA area? Because if they do, it will inevitably continue sort of, pouring gasoline on this conflagration. It's a very good question that we just don't have the answer to at this point.
All right, now adding the National Guard to that. All right, David Noriega from NBC News, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there. We're going to get back to our coverage here from our helicopter news chopper 4. We've been watching what he was describing, everyone pretty much in a standoff. It's a large group down there still. Thankfully, they were able to get most people rerouted, turned around, and off the 101.
And David, is just about a block from what the images you're seeing right now. Can we check back in now with Roland Spool about some of the developments here? Because, Roland, we saw officers move in, and yet now we're seeing even more people there on the freeway itself.
Exactly, and the standoff is a very good characterization of what we've been watching here at both this freeway underpass and that intersection that officers have been trying to hold down right down the street from the Royal Center. And we saw several squads of CHP officers make their way up underneath this underpass here. And then we saw a group of people actually run from the area and then back up the on-ramp, and then very slowly a number of people trickled back on to the freeway. And so we've been trying to reposition the chopper here to try and see if we can get eyes on the skirmish line being formed by the CHP. It's kind of hard to make out here as we are slightly shooting into the sun and our elevation as well. There's a couple law enforcement ships below us, so we can't get much lower than this. But for the most part, this group has been pretty much just standing in place for the most part, not moving, and pretty adamant that they're not going anywhere.
All right, Roland, it looked like there's a little bit of smoke being deployed there. We started to see the group start to walk away, but not too many people left that area. Carmen Dickerson, our reporter there, is on the ground as well. She is in downtown, has been covering this story all day. Carmen, if you could give us a little perspective, what you've been seeing, what you've been covering, and what you're seeing right now. If we can go to
we're showing you exactly what we're seeing right now over the freeway. It's the 101 freeway. We are several blocks back from where a lot of the activity is going on. But if you take back another look from our perspective from the Grand Avenue overpass, you can see the tail end of the chaos that's going on the 101 freeway. Those are officers. You can see some of the flashing lights just beyond us. A couple of freeway exits down, and from where we are, we can hear what sounds like flashbangs going on. When you know there is an effort to clear people from the freeway. So much of the perspective we're getting is the same one that you're getting from News Chopper 4, giving us an idea of what's going on the ground. But if it gives you an idea of just how far this sound and this effect carries, we can see smoke rising just beyond us, a couple of freeway exits down, and hear those bangs going off. from here you cannot see the people that are on the ground, but you can see lines of cars stopping, people stopping on the freeway overpasses to try to understand what's going on beneath. Of course, the advice from law enforcement is to clear out of this area. If you were on the freeway, that's certainly what they're asking people to do, but even people around in the surrounding streets, because it's completely locked down the area of downtown, people just trying to go about their daily business, people trying to get in and around the area, and then of course people who started to clear the area and walk back to their cars and try to get home. And so it's really a mess both on the freeway and on the city streets.
Yeah, this has been declared an unlawful assembly as we're watching rolling shots as we talk to you, Carla. I did see at least one person throw things at officers who were trying to get these protesters off the roadway. Did you see the line of cars that were on the roadway too? They had to turn around, go the opposite way as CHP helped them get off the freeway. These were unsuspecting drivers, I'm assuming, who got caught up in this unknowingly.
Yes, and we saw sort of an unusual sight when we see on the freeway, people backing up and coming. And one, I'm not sure if we're able to show them, where we can see right the Los Angeles street exit coming up, but also Broadway just beyond it. We saw cars that were pulled under the underpass and had to back up and go back off on Broadway to try to get out of this standstill traffic and trying to get clear of this area. So for the most part, at least from our perspective, we can see that the freeway is clear of these cars coming on, but that is because so many of those unsuspecting drivers were diverted and had to drive off of the freeway, in some cases turning around or driving backwards.
Yeah, we're watching the traffic nightmare right now as drivers are trying to get off the road, and then people, they're all lined up there just watching. We have people, and then in between officers, and then on the guardrail, people standing there talking to the officers, taking pictures, and then other people who were part of that crowd down below.
And it is interesting, Karma, as we talk to you, we are seeing those, we see your shot here with more CHP officers arriving, and we're seeing also the first movement of people kind of backing up as officers converge there underneath that underpass, or that overpass rather. They're right underneath it, and it's just this ongoing standoff. It's interesting to watch in real time. And Carla, it seems to be completely disorganized out there in terms of the protests that were once organized. Now it's just seemingly a bunch of people everywhere.
Yes, and so much of what you see on the streets is people who clearly were responding to that dispersal order, or maybe they had just been out for too long, but people who definitely seem to be leaving the area, going about. Some people had signs, some people, had some flags, and so you can tell where they had been earlier, and they were moving away from this downtown core where all of this is focused. But then, of course, you have the number of people who are still in the standoff with law enforcement, and so there are people all over, and it's causing issues for blocks and blocks on the streets. And even the freeway, as you come here through these downtown interchanges, you can see the impact with the traffic just really just snarled, not what you would expect to see on a Sunday afternoon.
And how is that traffic moving? Are you seeing people? I mean, here it looks relatively organized. It's just kind of a mess. And earlier when we saw people turning around, they really seemed like they were desperate to get out of there, which I understand. They're caught in the situation. They want to get out. They don't know what's happening.
Absolutely, and keep in mind, especially if you're in the car and not necessarily aware of what's going on or which is the best way to get out, you're hearing these loud pops and you're seeing smoke rise in the air. You have no idea what is the best way to get out of this and how quickly you need to be moving, and that's not, you don't have a lot of options when you're stuck in freeway traffic. Fortunately, at least from the perspective we're showing you now, they've done a lot to clear, to either shut down entrances and exits and clear the backup of traffic, at least in this particular section, so people don't find themselves stuck in it. But it looks like we are seeing, I believe this car you're watching drive up now is also a law enforcement car. At least I think I could tell that from the license plate as it was driving up. So no more just ordinary people out and about driving up to this, but people are certainly impacted on the streets surrounding it.
Our Karma Dickerson there on the ground in downtown LA. Karma, thank you. Stand by and continue to stay safe. I want to see if we can go back up quickly to Roland Sproul, because Roland, we're finally seeing some movement here with CHP officers there trying to finally get this crowd off the 101 there.
Yes, and we have seen what appears to be the flashbangs that Karma was referring to. We've seen the smoke as well, and that seems to be having some effect, as well as officers now advancing to push these people back off the freeway. And what occurs to me, what is striking to me, is they may have been using this freeway underpass as cover and concealment until such time that they needed to advance. I know yesterday and Friday they were talking about people throwing bottles and rocks and that sort of thing at officers. So it may quite possibly have been that they were using this as a little bit of cover and concealment from the people that are on the overpass from having things thrown to advance and try and get these people off the freeway. I don't see any other smoke right now. I don't see any potential flashbangs, but just the physical presence and the physical force of these officers now, and it seems like they've gotten a number of officers into place now. You can see these other officers on this other frontage road here, and the name of this frontage road escapes me for right now, I'm sorry. But look at all these officers right now. They're all standing in place. They've been able to get a lot of the onlookers that were standing there on that frontage road off of there. This may also be an on-ramp. Let me pull out of the shot here. This might be the northbound on-ramp. They were able to get those people off of there, so you have officers standing into place, and then you have officers on the freeway that just by their physical presence now starting to push people away and push them off the freeway.
There are still so many people there on the side that are watching. They're on both sides, actually. But some are on the roads, and just wonder if the traffic is going by, and it seems like we're seeing people riding bicycles in between cars. It seems kind of dangerous, but yeah, we have a lot of spectators out there behind the officers that are lined up, and they're starting to make a move. The thing I don't see in the officers is that it seems overly aggressive. We're not really seeing them move in aggressively.
They're kind of just trying to, it's kind of slowly and methodically push them off the freeway. And Roland, I believe where those officers on the right are, those are the northbound lanes of the 101. The side road, the frontage road, Arcadia Street, is just to the right of that. That's where you see that line of protesters, those other vehicles that many of whom may not even realize that they drove right into a major protest here. But Roland, to Kathy's point, it seems like they're being very methodical about this. They're going to try to push them maybe up that on-ramp there to the left of our screen.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with you. Those are the northbound lanes of the 101 freeway that these officers are standing on, and we have not seen anything particularly aggressive behavior or anything. Just a very slow push of these people off the freeway. Again, I have not seen any additional smoke or any additional flashbangs being used, and I'm gonna push in a shot here because it looks like officers here, I'm not quite sure where they're headed, but there seems to be some sense of urgency there. I'm not quite sure if what they're going after there.
We can kind of follow them as we're talking to you to see if they're going to join the ranks there, or if they have some other area underneath here where they are trying to go, but we don't see anything at this point unless they are just joining the officers who are already lined up there, or something has happened that we literally can't see.
Yeah, it's interesting, Roland. They're not south of this Alameda overpass here. They kind of have them contained, and really there's no other place for these protesters to go except back up the on-ramp there. Roland, we're going to stay with your shot. Right now we want to get to NBC4's Camilla Rambaldi. She's in our newsroom right now with more on the arrests that have been made during these protests. Camilla.
Yeah, hi Jonathan and Kathy. We're getting some new numbers from the LAPD on some of the arrests that were made during these protests, specifically yesterday on Saturday. According to the LAPD, 27 arrests were made on Saturday, June 7th. The spokesperson says that 2 people were arrested for assaulting a peace officer, and that 1 was arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail, where the LAPD says 3 deputies were struck and also injured there. I just checked in with the LAPD to see if we can get some updated numbers right now. I am waiting to hear back. And as we saw on Friday, Jonathan and Kathy, following one of those rallies, hundreds of the demonstrators marched along the streets of downtown LA. There was at least 1 incident of vandalism as protesters there were also spraying graffiti on the federal building. And also, as we saw yesterday in Paramount, and what escalated there with protesters clashing with Border Patrol. And as we've been reporting, and the LAPD has declared this latest protest in downtown LA as an unlawful assembly. And as we heard from our NBC News correspondent David Noriega earlier was on the ground. He mentioned that there were about 4 people that were arrested there. Again, I am in contact with the LAPD. Hopefully we'll be able to report on some new numbers on what's happening specifically today here with people blocking traffic there on the 101 freeway. Jonathan and Kathy, I'll send it back to you.
On arrest, we'll get back to you. Thank you, Camilla Rimbaldi, live in our newsroom as we switch over to Eric Leonard, who's been watching this with us. And Eric, what we're watching now, law enforcement right now moving the crowd, trying to move the crowd. I just wanted to get an idea what you think of how they're going about this.
Make a decision about where to put the demonstrators. That was, at least in the first minutes of this, the least impactful on the rest of the public. And it was pretty clear that they were going to do something, take some kind of action to clear out the freeway. The people you're seeing there, I believe, are California Highway Patrol officers wearing their, for lack of a better description, their riot gear that are moving in to clear the people off of the roadway. It was a little bit of a hesitation to the start of that, I'm told from someone involved down there, because they were concerned about beginning to push people. Well, the officers were underneath the Los Angeles Avenue or Los Angeles Street overpass there. And as we saw, I think you could see that there were some objects that were being thrown down on the officers. They were initially reluctant to start taking action while they were underneath another group of demonstrators who might possibly try to throw things at them. That's obviously passed. They're well south of that now. Priority given to them is to clear the roadway. We saw demonstrators on both the north and the southbound lanes. I think what we're going to see here is the officers continue to push to the south and then get people onto the on-ramp. That's the on-ramp to the 101 South from Los Angeles Street, and then do everything they can to get people back onto the city streets. After that, it's probably anyone's guess about how this will go from there. The CHP is focused on the freeway. We know that the LAPD is trying to deal with what's going on up on the city streets, and as you've heard all of our reporters discussing, they have declared that an unlawful assembly, which means they can begin to use some sort of force to try to get people out of there. I know we're seeing a bunch of smoke right now. I'm not
and at least
sure
one
what that
takedown,
is.
Eric. Yeah, there was someone who they're throwing these devices, and then at least one person was taken down by officers there right against the wall. You mentioned we don't know what's going to happen when and if they can finally get these protesters off the freeway. We're seeing those canisters there of smoke there on the ground, Eric. How long do you think until we start potentially seeing use of force? I mean, this is completely chaotic at this point. There doesn't seem to be any kind of sense of an organized protest, and clearly people willing to clash with officers.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the actions of the people and the ability of the officers to respond. So there you go. With that takedown you were describing is somebody who was trying to, or it looked like, was trying to kick a canister of some kind that was emitting smoke back into the crowd of officers. Before we got to this situation where we're seeing this cloud of smoke or whatever it is in the middle of the freeway, as the officers first began to move south, it also looked like they grabbed a couple of people out of the crowd that they first came into contact with, put them in handcuffs or zip ties, and then marched them northbound towards the where the CHP cruisers were parked, stacked up there, as we saw on the 101 freeway. In scenes like this that we've covered before, oftentimes there are a handful of people in the crowd that are trying to engage with the police on physical terms, shoving officers, maybe throwing things. If there's enough police there, sometimes they'll try to grab those people out of the crowd, pull them through the line of officers, and put them in, detain them, and then decide what to do after that. In this case, the people that were willing to leave the freeway, it looks like already did. A moment ago, we saw that the officers were up against a line of people who didn't look like they were going to budge, and it seems like that's who they're dealing with right now. Again, most of the protesters here are just standing out on the streets, not having this kind of engagement and friction with the officers. This is a much smaller group that's decided to remain on the freeway, and as we've seen in the last couple of minutes, as people do various things right into the in front of the officers here, there's certainly a willingness on the part of the CHP to put people in handcuffs and take them away. I think it's going to depend on the circumstance. Again, the priority here obviously is to try to clear the freeway as quickly as possible, and it does seem like the folks who were willing to leave the freeway have already done so, and now we've got this confrontation brewing between the people left on the freeway and that line of officers who are there.
They have certainly moved them a lot, though, as we've been following this, and they just have the last few there, but it is growing rather contentious. Eric, I was wondering about the unlawful assembly. We've seen in the past where, law enforcement sets a deadline where they say, okay, by 5 o'clock you must go, you've got an hour. How will that work tonight?
It's really circumstance dependent. If they've already made that declaration around the federal building complex in downtown LA, I don't know that there's going to be another one. There's not going to be maybe another announcement that now you really have to go. They've made the decision clearly at the LAPD that they are going to try to corral and break up some of the demonstrations and push people in one direction or another. How that plays out is probably going to be largely dependent on how big the crowd gets or how small it gets if people begin to leave, and also the activity. As we watch the CHP officers there encircle that group that was on the roadway and are now pushing them back towards that on-ramp. Same kind of thing is going to happen out on city streets. Sometimes demonstrations organically move from one area to another, and then it becomes maybe a simpler process to convince people to leave. One thing that the LAPD has been dinged for repeatedly over the years of dealing with these large demonstrations in civil lawsuits that have followed, where people have alleged that they were mistreated or the officers used excessive force, is an idea of something called kettling, like a kettle on a stove, where the police will sometimes corral folks into an area where there is nowhere to go. And the courts have said repeatedly you can't do that. The police have to give people an avenue to leave freely. And so one of the things that we may see play out here is that you'll see all of the law enforcement perhaps move from one side and maybe a second street that's perpendicular to it, but making sure that there is a clear path, assuming they've declared this an unlawful assembly up on city streets, which it sounds like they did. Give people a clear path to leave, instructions to leave, and then we see them start finally using their physical presence to push people one direction or another. Clearly that's happened on the freeway. It sounds like that's in the makings on the surface streets, depending on everyone's behavior. If folks were standing around and chanting and carrying signs and maybe blocking an intersection, the chances of those being declared an unlawful assembly are far less than when you have these conflicts and friction between some people in the crowd and the police who are out there. That's typically when that sort of thing happens. It also, again, looks like the CHP is beginning to push their way up that off-ramp to get people off the freeway completely.
And we see yet another arrest, at least the second person in the last several minutes, Eric, being taken away in handcuffs or likely zip ties in this situation. Eric, in these particular situations, if someone is arrested at a protest, what kind of charges may they face? Or in this situation, especially when you're kicking a canister directly at an officer?
Well, these are difficult cases for a number of reasons. One is just the chaos of the situation. How does the government, meaning prosecutors, prove that the person who's in custody is the one that did a thing? It's a real difficulty with prosecution with things like rocks and bottles, because how do you know where they came from, especially if they get thrown from inside a crowd of hundreds or thousands of people? So one of the things that has been happening more recently, and you might even be seeing it somewhere in the crowd of CHP officers, is they bring photographers and videographers with them whose only job is to try to record the actions of the people who are closest to the officers, so they can try to figure out what one person did or another. In theory, you can be prosecuted for failing to leave after an unlawful assembly has been declared. Oftentimes, as we saw with some of the recent arrests at university campuses around Southern California, decisions were made just to drop the cases after some months had passed. There were no significant efforts to prosecute people other than specific individuals where it was very clear on the part of the police and prosecutors that they had been involved in some type of particular violence or particular vandalism. So a lot of times, these arrests, even though no one really wants to say it directly, the arrests are a means to an end. You can legally and lawfully detain somebody on suspicion of failing to obey an order or any number of things that happen in these crowd control situations, and that removes that person from the demonstration for the next few hours at least. And sometimes that's kind of the unstated goal, to get the people who, at least the officers on the ground, may believe are instigating or